Today's episode of the InsideEVs Podcast is brought to you by E-Range EV Tyre. E-Range EV tyres are specifically engineered for electric vehicles. Using an advanced manufacturing process called liquid phase mixing, E-Range EV's EcoPoint 3 technology creates a tyre with lower rolling resistance and longer range, while offering low levels of wear and high grip. All this while staying affordable. Go to erangetires.com. That's ERANGE tyres.com to find your EV's next set of tyres.
Hello, and welcome to this week's InsideEVs podcast. Now, a lot has happened in the last week, but thankfully, three wonderful very knowledgeable guides and me are here to talk you all through it. So in a vague semblance of order, we have Miss GoElectric herself, Lacey. Hello. A wave on the live stream. That's lovely. We have Hazel Southwell, who is currently in Sardinia.
Hello.
Explain
yes.
yourself.
I apologise if my connection's a bit dodgy or there's background noise. I'm in the middle of a military base in Sardinia at Extreme, which is an off-road electric racing series. So it's all very on brand.
All very on brand, and I imagine there will be lots of stories coming for that for us next week, which is delightful. And finally, Mr. Patrick George. Hello, chap. If you unmute yourself, we'll be able to hear you and everything.
Goodness, right out of the gate making mistakes. Howdy, folks. It's great to be here with you all.
So, now I reckon... Oh, and there's me. Sorry, I keep forgetting myself. I'm Alex. Hi, Alex Goy. I'm here to say words and stuff. And also, it's time to talk about some news, some proper EV news. EV news. There we are, shiny graphic. EV news. Let's kick off with the UAW strike. Now, I know both Lacey and Patrick have opinions on this one, but from what I've read and what I've seen, it's basically they want more money. And aren't getting it. So, Lacey or Patrick, who wants to lead us on this?
Go ahead, Patrick. You're a new, fresh face here. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I'll kick this off. So, at the stroke of midnight last night, the United Auto Workers Union went on strike at all three of the big three automakers, kind of big 2.5 these days, but we'll call them the big three, which has never happened before. They've never gone after all three at once. They're going after three different truck plants to start with, and they might do more. It sounds like we need to dwell unnecessarily on this podcast because it's not hitting any EV plants, at least not yet. But I think that this is really notable because these workers are going on strike, in part because of EVs and technology. Like they are trying to make sure that the battery plants that are going in all over America, which are often joint ventures with other companies like LG, they want those to be unionized plants and union jobs too. So in addition to kind of fighting for wages that they gave up during the Great Recession and a lot of other benefits they're trying to fix, it is very much a fight for the future that's tied to electric vehicles and tied to technology and where this industry is going. Because as we all know, EVs generally require a lot fewer parts to build, a lot less maintenance to create. And there's very much a possibility where, our auto industry and globally, it's going to have a lot fewer jobs than it has now. And I think that they're kind of seizing their moment to make sure that doesn't happen to them. And it's going to be really fascinating to see how this plays out. Like longer it goes on, fewer cars will be on the lots. They're starting with Jeep Wranglers and Ford Broncos and things like that. But I think it could have some ripple effects on the rest of the economy and the industry. So it's something we got to mention here, and it's got some real ties to just sort of the way things are going, I guess.
Yeah, the estimate is I read that it can lose $5 billion in 10 days of strike action, which is quite a big hit. Now, the workers are asking for 40% more money. So far, they've been offered between 14 and 16%, which obviously isn't quite up to where the workers would like it to be. Lacey, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's interesting because, there are direct sales companies like Tesla and Rivian and Lucid that don't have to deal with this. They don't have UAW contracts and they're avoiding it at all costs. They're also avoiding the whole dealer network thing. So it is a kind of a leg up for them if it lasts for a little bit too much longer. But as far as I understand it, I thought I read that the UAW only has a certain amount of money to be able to support their workers for a period of time. And then they kind of are like forced to have a deal. So as far as I understand, they are the ones that don't really have a leg up. It's more of the automakers because they're, in a sense, nobody wants to stop the lines and not have their production keep rolling because it costs billions and billions of dollars for the automakers. But I think that we'll probably see.
Do you think the automakers can ride it out and just go, well, we can wait longer than you can?
I think they want to get a deal done regardless. They don't want to have to waste all that time and money, but I think that they do have a stronger foothold than the UAW does. But the bad press is bad press, like regardless. And right now you have an administration that is very union friendly, so it's just gonna, I think, pile up more.
I guess striking is very much the thing these days. A lot of people are fed up that wage stagnation has happened, and they want to be able to, I don't know, afford the cars they're building, and housing, and eating, and electricity, and. So you can kind of see where they're coming from.
Well, I think I read that last year the average salary amount was $78,000 for a union worker at a Ford plant. And, you know, they get their base salary and they get like pretty big bonuses, profit sharing, stuff like that. And obviously really good benefits. So I don't know. That's kind of a conversation. I was like, of course, we have to move with the times with inflation and prices of things going up. But how much? 40% or closer to 15%? I don't know.
That's true. But Carlos Tavares at Stellantis makes $26 million a year.
Right.
So that's the thing that they got that, why they got this, you know, stuck in their craw, as they'd say where I'm from. And I think it's the battery stuff makes this a really interesting moment. Like, I think that there is a lot of momentum for these workers with what we've seen with like the Hollywood strike and the UPS strike. And I think that this is a union that was really dogged by just kind of weakness for decades and a literal corruption scandal that sent a bunch of their leaderships to prison in the last few years. I think they're kind of seeing, like, if they don't hit this hard now, if this industry goes electric, which it all indications seems it's going to, right? You know, they're may not have you know, as many jobs or as good paying jobs as they have now. And it's like, it's for them, it's like now or never. And I think that, you know, Lacey's right. Like, the automakers don't want to drag this out, and like the UAW has a strike fund that'll run out like any union. But like, I don't think this is going to go on forever like the Hollywood strike has been. Like, it takes years to make TV shows and movies. Takes, you know, days and weeks to get cars on the road. Like, though it doesn't behoove anybody to drag this out all the time. And I don't think anybody wants to be paying more for new cars than they already are in America. Alex and Hazel, I understand that's gotten very bad in Europe and everywhere else too, is cost of new vehicles, right? So nobody wants to deal with that forever too.
No, well, it's one of those things where cars themselves are getting more expensive, but similarly, wages haven't risen to meet them. That's a global problem. Because everyone expects a vehicle that has, I don't know, GPS, CarPlay. I want heated seats. I want it to sing for me and dance for me and show me where I'm going, and also be comfortable and very efficient and safety features. Yeah, ADAS. Well, we're going to talk about those later when we talk about the Hyundai Kona. They want all of this stuff, and sadly, as I've had to point out to a few people on X this week, stuff costs stuff. So yeah,
But why though? Why must stuff cost stuff?
Because it just does. And that's the worst.
Otherwise, you can get a Dacia.
Otherwise, you can get a Dacia. And now there is a new Dacia EV coming, the Dacia Spring, and I can't wait to drive it because I love Dacias, because I'm weird. But we will keep an eye on the UAW strike. But let's talk about one of the manufacturers that's been affected by the strike, GM. Do we think it will actually make the $30,000 Equinox or Equinox EV? Thoughts, friends?
It's not looking very promising with this Blazer information coming out. People that have ordered Blazer EVs that wanted the introductory trim level are now kind of getting forced into the second level up of trim, which starts at a much higher price point. So to me, I don't know. It's tough. I could see. So there are a lot of automakers that do this, where they come out with like a first edition or a launch edition, and it's like the top spec priced, option of that particular trim level, and then eventually they bring it to offer more entry level price points and options that make it a little bit more bare bones. So maybe they are wanting to go that direction. That makes sense as far as profit margins to try to fund the rest of the lower priced trims, but I don't know. It's not looking too good.
The
think
interesting.
My
Carry on,
concern
Patrick.
also is like GM's EV lineup seems really promising, but it's also like imaginary at this point. Mostly, like they came out at the beginning of the year, they're like, we have a full lineup that'll qualify for the tax credits. It's like, well, what is that? Well, it's the Bolt and the Bolt EUV, and it's like, well, you're canceling that. It's like, yes, but Equinox. But also, like, all of these cars had been significantly delayed. Like, they'd had a lot of software and production problems. The Cadillac Lyric, which they've hyped up endlessly, that like barely exists outside of like the Detroit press car fleet. I don't know if y'all saw the Barbie movie. Like, the Blazer figures really heavily into a scene in that.
What I really liked about the Barbie movie I saw it the other week is that all the toxic Kens drive Hummer EVs, and I thought that was a brilliant shot in the foot of product placers. Like, yeah, this car's really cool, great guys buy it. It's like, this person has just destroyed a world, and he's driving one of these. All right, carry on. Spoilers if you haven't seen it. Sorry, but it's been a couple of months. Where have you been? The summer was amazing.
It's an amazing film. No, it was a hilarious unintentional cell phone, but it's like this lineup they're hyping, including this Equinox. Like, it's at some point they're going to need to deliver on it, right? I mean, you run certain parts of the Tesla playbook. You don't run all of them where you promise crazy stuff that you maybe do and maybe don't. Like, I think the GM's going to need to really put metal on the road here if we're going to believe in this stuff.
If you're going to copy any part of Tesla, the saying we're going to build something and then fantastically not doing that probably isn't the one you want to do. The interesting thing about this I found is that so it was a petition has been started by the Electric Vehicle Association. And they say EV affordability starts with UGM. But the thing is, it's the story which went up on the 13th says over 600 EV drivers. Now, for GM, is 600 voices going to be enough to get them to go, oh, well, you know what, we best make this affordable car?
Especially if they're already driving EVs. Like, that's not a particularly persuasive thing. But something about this to me, like, I honestly believe automakers have to stop announcing price points until they have actually got the cars in production, because like you saw this with the F-150 Lightning, where they came out with this 37,000 figure at the start, and like Ford were very willing to talk about it. They were talking about how they'd managed to make that affordable and whatever, and the F-150 Lightning keeps going up and up in price because it's just not deliverable at that. And like, they've just got to get more realistic.
Yeah, I guess it's a matter of people going, we're going to do the thing. We're going to do the thing. It is affordable. I know everyone says it's not affordable, but it really is. And then they go, oh no, this is really expensive to do, especially now. It's that reminder, I think, that a lot of people don't give themselves. This is still it's still the early days of the technology. And, you know, there are advancements coming and there are economies of scale coming. But right now, everyone's kind of seems to be scrabbling to get everything and promising these magical things that they just can't do.
I think we'll probably...
sorry.
No, go ahead, Hazel.
I mean, the other thing is the world is just so unstable. I mean, you have like the price of freight going up 4 times in like a single month. Sometimes we've had that in the past year. Like, there's a huge amount of instability in basic supply chain stuff, in stuff like delivering cars. I just think companies need to price in a way that doesn't overpromise something, because you can't set a price point for a car that you're actually going to deliver in 2 years based on what you think it might be now before you've even got it into production.
Well, I'm wondering too, like, okay, they said $30,000, but will it be in the $30,000 between 30 and 40? What do you guys think about that? Will they make it?
And that's
It's
like, is that before or after the tax incentives too? Like, is it like it costs like 39, but then thanks to Joe Biden, like it's 32 or something. So
it's $39,999. That's not $40,000. Well, no. Technically right is the best kind of right, but it is also the most irritating.
Or they do like what Tesla does on their website and they say, including gas savings. It's like, oh, I hate that. No.
Get in the bin. Right, so let's have a chat about something. Well, not quite different, but let's talk about Toyota. So Toyota's recent EV offerings have been over on this side of the pond. At least they've been commented on. The ranges aren't quite up there, the pricing isn't quite up there, but their its next gen EVs, Toyota Motor Corporation's next gen EVs, are promising ranges up to 621 miles with cost savings over the BZ4X, with 4 different types of batteries, one coming very quickly in 2026 offering a 497 mile range, and then later in the decade, going up to 621. And they're going to be a bit thinner, which means shorter cars, which means better aero, which means better efficiency. What do we think, gang?
I think it's really exciting that solid state batteries have been pulled back an entire year, so that now they're 5 years off, because they've been 6 years off for about 20 years. So that's very exciting.
Permanently, it seems like they're always 5 years off.
like flying cars. It's always 5 years away. It's the future and always will be. No, that's interesting. I'm actually really excited by this. Hazel pointed out last week, she thinks that like BMW is doing some really low key, interesting things on the battery front. It's not getting a ton of attention. I agree with that. I also think like the other one is Toyota, believe it or not. And yes, they've been a laggard in this field. And by the way, the Brits here, I'm so sorry you pronounce it Z, and so you have to say BZ4X because that makes that name even worse for you somehow.
Well, otherwise, it's BZ, and you end up gurning at people when you tell them what you drive.
Well, BZ4X, that takes like 30 seconds, like half a minute, 2 minutes to say. It's even worse. But no, like this company has dragged its feet on EVs, but it's also, I believe, the most powerful manufacturing apparatus in the world. And I think that when it gets serious, it is going to get really serious, this stuff. And I've talked to a lot of people in the company. It's like part of like the Toyota way, as they call it. Like their way of doing business is that you don't hype things. You don't make big promises. You just do it. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. And that's kind of at odds with a lot of the crazy startup stuff that we see, staking your company's valuation on big promises. So like, I'm going to give Toyota the benefit of the doubt here. And I think for its own sake, it's got to catch up. But like, if it says it's going to do this stuff, I think there's a very strong chance that it can. And I hope they do, because like you got to imagine that company's pissed that the top brand being traded in for Teslas is Toyota's. Like the company that gave us the Prius cannot love that statistic.
I mean, I think this is exciting. I think because I think it's also good to see companies that are seriously, and especially Toyota, which is the biggest car manufacturer in the world, to see them mapping out a visible EV plan and a visible battery plan, and like that they're thinking about platforms, they're thinking about how they're going to do this. So being sarcastic about the solid state stuff aside, the only thing that I'm a little bit about is that they've put charging times. So there's no talk about exactly what the capacity of these batteries are. Which obviously I would like to see a lower capacity battery and a higher efficiency on regeneration and stuff and recovery within the cars. But so there's no specifics of the size of pack, which is maybe fine. But they have given a charging time of 20, and I assume this is like an aimed for charging time of 30 minutes and 20 minutes. 30 minutes for the kind of standard battery on each generation, and 20 minutes for the performance. And I don't love that, because it feels like a very unrealistic thing in terms of how EVs actually work in the world, which is that your charging time is however slow the charger you have plugged into is. because like that's talking about a theoretical, and like it slightly bothers me just as a like, because it's detached from the functional role of EVs, which, okay, that's total pedantry, but this is a podcast about electric vehicles. And I kind of, it worries me a little to see car companies aiming for these things that maybe aren't necessarily entirely under their control, compared to having like goals about things like over 50% of the energy used by the car will be from recovery or something like that.
I would say, like, I've been saying this for a while, is that there are companies like Toyota or even some of the other Japanese automakers in general that have come out with lackluster EVs to start, but there will eventually, I believe, be like some consolidation in the automotive industry with automakers. And I think that the only way that some of these companies can stay in the game is if they leapfrog in technology, which solid state is a promise for that. But again, we've been hearing about solid state for a really long time, and I'm not saying it's not coming, but it's always the sample set of a really small test bed that they can prove that the technology works. But once you get it into a vehicle on a mass scale in volume, that's another conversation. So I hope that they can do it. And I think that they will be a survivor if they can adopt that type of technology. There's a ton of different battery technology coming to market too. So as long as they keep pushing forward with this and it actually becomes a reality, then okay, I'll be happy, because then they seem serious to me.
Seth in the comments has said, are there not concerns about the longevity of LFP batteries as well? What do we think?
Well, LFP will live, I think, no matter what, alongside the other technology, just because the life cycle is much longer than what you'd get out of a solid state battery. And that application is really popular in energy storage systems. So people at their homes that want power walls or whatnot to be able to have as a backup for grid support. But LFP just has a better cycle life. So like you can discharge it and recharge like so many more times than even solid state or pretty much any NMC or lithium ion chemistry that we see on the market today. So I think there will be a place where they both exist, but there has to be a culture shift for people to realize that, okay, since LFP doesn't tend to have as energy dense properties, where they're kind of designated as a standard range battery pack right now in the marketplace, because they can only achieve so much in the same amount of space as a lithium ion battery pack. But that said, there was a story a few weeks ago from CATL that said that they're getting very close to optimizing that energy density so it's closer to the performance of a lithium ion battery. So that there's still some work to be done, that it might solve a lot of problems for people to just go LFP. I don't think they're going away though.
Lacey, do you think we'll get to the point where it's like one day, like the solid state battery comes out, and that's like the premium option on an EV, almost like when you used to spring for the V8, you know?
Yeah, and I think we're kind of already seeing that a little bit with LFP as a standard option in some of the automakers, because a lot of people actually don't know this. LFP is very popular in China, and it has been for a really long time, but there were patents in the US and North American market where we could not utilize that technology. Only maybe one or two A123 had access to licensing it, but those were just lifted at the end of 2022, and that's why you see everyone talking about LFP in this market now, because there's actually access to the technology and automakers can implement it here without paying an arm and a leg.
It's much more recyclable. Oh, sorry.
Carry on.
It's much more recyclable as well. Like as a battery chemistry, it's one of the more potential, or like it's got a lot of potential for like more recovery, which obviously with all of the incentives both in the US and the EU to use and reclaim recycled lithium, that's or battery components, then that's a big factor. Something I do think about this Toyota plan is like, okay, it's got the lithium solid state at the end of it, But at the same time, you're already seeing sodium ion enter the market, and the price reduction in a sodium ion battery compared to a lithium solid state battery is going to be colossal. So I will be interested to see how realistic that looks by the time we get there.
I just want to draw our attention to one of the comments in here. Carl in San Diego said clearly they don't own EVs if they believe a 600-mile range car is optimal. Now, Hazel, you mentioned this earlier, but what do we think? Do you think 600 miles of range is actually needed, or is this a number to make people go, oh, I'll have one of those and I'll charge it once a month and it'll be great?
America.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay, that's that answer.
I'm just saying. Listen, people in America have this threshold that they need 500 miles of range at least to be able to adopt an EV, whether that's because they tow a lot. We have big trucks here. We do absurd things. We are Americans. So me personally, I have a Max Pack R1T. I'm sure everyone, I say this all the time, but I have that because I live in a cold climate. I need all-wheel drive. That form factor fits my lifestyle the best. I go to remote places where there's not a lot of charging infrastructure, but generally speaking, when we have, all this NEVI funding put out, all the stations are installed, there's charging stations every 50 miles on every highway corridor in every single state, and people realize that they only drive 30 miles a day on a daily basis, it's going to be fringe use cases. So I think, like Patrick was saying, it'll be like, okay, this is the premium option, but I do think that Americans have a hard time accepting the fact that they could actually get an EV with a 250-mile range and be extremely happy with their life, and it would save them a lot of headache because of the lower maintenance and all these other things and reliability, less moving parts. So that's my experience, is that, and I've worked on a lot of EV launch campaigns, and I've talked to customers, and I cannot tell you how many times I've heard this, like, it's not enough range, it's not enough range. And to some degree, I do agree with them because of all the elements combined and the fact that efficiency is not a priority for every automaker right now. But I think that we see a 500-mile range EV right now, but the price is too crazy. So that's going to be the next conversation is, okay, now we got to get an affordable one that can do 500 miles of range. Well, we got to make sure that the costs make sense for that, for the car companies and for, everyone else involved.
Yeah, I think Lacey's right. As the other American here, it's like we just, there's this weird fear of being stranded, which doesn't happen often with EV owners much. Like, you get inconvenience, you have weird outcomes, you take longer on road trips, but getting stranded is fairly rare. But I think that as Americans, like, we're very afraid of being stuck, getting raided by brigands, like, this country is like 5 minutes away from Mad Max on a good day. Like, they're just really terrified of that outcome. But I think that Lacey's right. It's like, I think there's a future where a lot of Americans are going to buy, like the 800-mile Freedom battery, and then they realize, you know what? I had this for 3 years, and like I only need 300 miles of range between the home charging I do and like maybe 1 or 2 trips a year. Like Lacey's totally right. Like, every use case she made for her, larger Rivian, 100%. And I live in upstate New York, and like I'm in a very similar boat as you. So, like, I get it, but I think a lot of people just need to be kind of shown that they don't need like as extreme a case as they think that they do. If we get the charging stuff right.
On a sort of a similar note, I spent a bit of time with the guys from Rivian. They make this sort of small city, not Rivian, Maving. You were talking about Rivian. I'm talking about Maving. Maving, they make a tiny kind of commuter electric motorcycle, and it's perfect for London. And what they found is they have capacity for two batteries, one where sort of an engine would be and one in where the fuel tank would be. And people go, oh, well, it'll only do 80 miles if I've got 2 batteries in it. That's way too few miles. I can't be dealing with that. That's terrible. I'll have the full 80-mile one, please. And then they find within about 2 weeks to a month, users are coming back to them saying, I really didn't need that second battery. I've now just got one on the go, and it just lives in a cupboard and doesn't do much. So it's a thing. I guess it'll come. But if we're going to talk about needless but impressive things, a new 0 to 62 EV record has been set this week by some students. from Zurich and Lucerne University in a car called the Mython. And it's now the fastest EV from 0 to 62 miles an hour. It did it in 0.956 seconds, beating the previous record of 1.461 seconds from the University of Stuttgart by about half a second. That's kind of mad. Patrick is laughing.
I just can't even. My brain can't fathom what 0 to 60 in 0.9 seconds feels like. That's like you've like bent time around you and skipped forward in the universe or something. Like
now I've done so that the fastest production car kinda is the Rimac Nevera at 1.8, but also the McMurtry Spieling, that fan car thing that's very quick up Goodwood and looks kind of odd, looks like a razor from the future.
Don't we all own McMurtry Spreelings? Doesn't everyone here on this podcast own? I have like 2.
My butler has 7, but I've driven the Nevera and I've done the full bore run. Admittedly, it was pre the record, so they may have made a few adjustments. But that is honestly one of the least pleasant experiences. You do it once and go, "Wow, that was amazing," and then you do it again and go, "I'm not comfortable with this. This is pointless and it hurts and I don't like it."
The thing is, though, like, because like this is obviously like student stuff. They're developing things. It's like this is a university doing university stuff. It's literally research, and like I kind of think this is the place for it, not as a lot of OEMs have been kind of trying to introduce, sticking it as a launch in a production car that actually is meant to be used on roads. Like, this is where this silly 0 to 60 time should be being chased, whereas like Lucid and stuff putting these controls in things that they probably shouldn't be in. Like, yeah.
Yeah, Lucid has some more dire needs to address. I think, because they're doing pretty good on the powertrain efficiency front and performance. But I think this is so cool because I love the idea of a younger crowd getting into EVs and development of EVs at such a pivotal moment in their life. And I've seen quite a few times where actually like companies like Rivian and Tesla sponsor programs for when they race these cars against one another, like a lot of the students that bring the universities together. And I think you're exactly right, Hazel. This is like the perfect application for them to invest in it a little bit and support it, but let it happen at this stage where they're coming up with these really cool, unique ideas because they're fresh minds. They're not stuck in a rigid, automotive structure where at corporate America, maybe someone used to work in this one department and they pull them in another department. They don't necessarily like dive deep into the technology. So I think this is so cool from a standpoint of not only the development of it and achieving these insane records, but also getting the youth involved at such a prime age.
And what's especially cool about this one is that it weighs 309 pounds, which in not freedom unit I think is 140 something. Memory serves, 140 kilos. But they focus not only on the power and the performance, but on the aero of the car. So if you go onto Inside EVs, the full story is there, but they explain how they focused on the aero, so there's not a big silly wing on it or anything like that. But they also said they developed something of a vacuum cleaner to suck it to the ground, so kind of ground effects fan car territory, which I really like. As Hazel was saying, this is student engineering. The kids who made this, well, not kids, they're grown-ups, but they're really, really smart. And they went, all right, how do we make sure this stays on the ground, doesn't go upside down, and beats a record? And as Carl in San Diego pointed out, it did 0 to 60 or 0 to 100 kph in just 42 feet. And I'm trying to measure that in mies. That's 9 mies long, which isn't that far.
Can we all just measure thing in Alex Goy's?
Metric goys.
Metric goy. Hang on, 9 mies. That puts me at 5 feet tall. That's not quite right, but I'm not quite 5. So maybe 7.5 7.5 meters. That's not long at all. Justin Hill, yes, the metric system is non-freedom units. We have freedom units and non-freedom units.
I also love this thing because this is sports car stuff, and it's like, we God knows the automakers are making, very fast electric SUVs that weigh as much as an apartment complex. But, for those of you who love like the Boxster and the Miata and would love to see like that concept survive into the future, this doesn't look far off. I mean, it's small. I don't know what it weighs, but it's certainly lighter than these big ones. The ground effects you mentioned are really clever. It's fast. Like give me a version of this that's like a production car that's still small and light. Yeah, like Lotus should be doing. And by the way, I saw the SUV, the new electric SUV in Munich.
The Electra.
I blurted out when I walked by, like uncontrollably, my God, it's huge. So
it is massive. So yeah, if we're talking the Lotus side of things, the Electra is very, very big, and it's got a lot of batteries in it and a lot of power, and it is, in fairness, very, 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 very fast. And the tech and the toys on it are very cool. But yeah, I guess, hey, Hazel, you're right when you say this is the kind of thing Lotus should be doing. The problem is Lotus was doing this with internal combustion engine cars, and only very dull accountants bought them. So and me. So
well, it's also, and we don't have to dwell on Lotus too for this convo, but it's also like, it's funny to me that like, where was Tesla born? Tesla was born from Lotus, like revising and stuffing batteries into a Lotus. Like, I just, I wish somebody would go back to that original concept and nail it at scale, because it could be done, and this shows that there's a future for that, hopefully.
Well, it's been a good week for students breaking records, because as well as going incredibly fast in an EV, some students from the Tech University of Munich have gone 1,599 miles on a charge of a 15.5 kilowatt hour battery, which works out at 103.1 miles per kilowatt hour. It took them 6 days in a hangar somewhere in Munich. It's pretty incredible. And bear in mind that the Mercedes EQXX, that very bullet shaped concept, that would do 8 miles per kilowatt hour. This will do 103 miles per kilowatt hour. I love it. I especially love the fact that they decided definitely not to go for power. It has a 0.5 horsepower engine. How do we think we could see this technology on the streets, friends?
I mean, it's just training us all to hypermile. I'd be interested to see what their average speed was over time, and to see how long that track was, because I actually was on we did a video maybe last year or the year before. It was me and a couple of friends that are in the EV community, like the Kilowatts, Zach Black Model 3 on Twitter. So some of these big social media EV enthusiasts. And we took a Lucid Air out to Utah, and we tried to achieve a record of breaking the longest travel in a single charge, and we hit 687 point some odd miles on a single charge in that car. So we kind of technically broke a record, but it wasn't an official Guinness World Record. But it just shows that the way you drive, your behavior, and not only that, but how many times you're turning around, creating additional friction. How are you going on a flat surface? All these things really do
what they really need
EVs.
is that they need the runway from Fast and the Furious. That's what they need. The never-ending runway, no extra friction, no bends. The Inside EVs has commented truly differing personality types between the 0 to 62 record teams and 1,599 mile teams. I wonder if there's any crossover. I'm guessing, a voice of the gods above us, that they're just colossal, beautiful, brilliant nerds who want to see what they can do. This is, again, this is the wonderful end of frontier tech, of going, I wonder if.
They're two different Formula Student competitions, actually. So there's a performance one and there's the endurance one. And there's also one where they have to do it with solar and stuff. Like, there's a whole range of different competition fields in Formula Student.
I love that. I love that so very, 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 very much. Though, yes, I would be keen to find out their average speed, and also how they did their driver changes. Because one person can't have been sat in that car for 6 days, unless they were going so slowly they could have a power nap between corners.
No, not with that attitude, they won't.
Anyway, students are awesome. We love them. Let's talk about the new Hyundai. They launched a whole ad campaign in the UK to tell us how to pronounce it, and everyone's just going to carry on with Hyundai. The Kona Electric. Cool thing. In the US, sub $35,000. They say, if that changes, please don't shout at me. There's two batteries. The longer range, the bigger one, is 64.8 kilowatt hours. They say it'll give 260 miles of range. You get 201 horsepower out of that and 188 pound-feet. They also say just over 40 minutes from 10 to 80% of charge. And it's all round a bit bigger and more luxurious. Now, I went out and had a bit of a drive in this week in Czechia, where they're being made, or some of them are being made. And you know what? It's really quite good to a point. So it's a very smooth, pleasant, charming electric car. It does all the EV stuff really well. It's super quiet. They've managed to get a little bit of weight into the steering. It's not full of feedback or anything like that. It's not a it's not a Lotus, but it's truly lovely. The infotainment screen's got two 12 and a bit inch screens, one for passengers, one for the driver. As is pointed out in the comments, styling is approximately 3,000 times better than the outgoing Kona. Hard agree. It does look like something the First Order would give to stormtroopers to take away for the weekend, especially in white or black. But there is a problem. Would my lovely co-host care to guess what the problem is? They're all looking blankly. This is excellent news. Lacey?
I have no idea.
You have no idea? Right.
Like maybe that it's just like a refresh and not a full redesign.
Well, it's based on a new platform. It's based on the K3 EV platform, and I had a good chat with an engineer about what that means. It basically means it's
EGMP.
It's a bit bigger and a bit flashier, which does mean there is loads of space in it. Something like a 400 odd litre boot trunk. And there's loads of space in the back. It's super comfy, and yeah, lots of toys. But the problem is, and I'm going to be one of those very tedious people that bangs on about the EU, which sounds very odd coming from a Brit. It's EU safety regulations, because oh my, for an EV that's supposed to be silent, all it does is bong. Everything you do, if you look at it funny, it'll bong. If the car sees a new speed limit, it'll give you a happy bong. If you drift 1 mile an hour over, you get an angry bong. If it thinks you aren't looking dead ahead, you'll get a bong. You get about 3 seconds grace with that. So when you're at a T-junction looking for, if a truck's about to destroy you, more than 3 seconds, it'll bong. It's very sensitive on your driving style. So if you give it, a little bit of leeway, if you say kind of a little bit not quite as on it as it thinks you should be, it'll tell you need to stop for a coffee because you're almost certainly going to have an accident. If you're indicating into another lane and there's a car behind you and it assumes you haven't checked your mirrors and you're just a functional moron who somehow got a driving license, it will then bong at you. For a silent car, it is half noisy. But
can you turn this stuff off easily or at all?
Yes, you can. You can go into hang on, I wrote this down. It's you go into the car's main menu, you go into settings, you go into vehicle safety, and then you can turn it off from there. You can do it, but when you turn the car back on, it all resets. And it's not Hyundai's fault. This is the thing.
That part is.
That part is, but it's EU safety regs that basically cars have to have this stuff in order to stop people from dying, because rather than people learning how to drive, they don't, and cars now bong at them. And it does, it does keep you very alert, but it did make me scream with rage within 20 minutes. Whether the US cars like that, I don't know. I'd have to talk to someone from the US who's driven it, but it's an interesting vehicle. I mean, I love the look of it. It's gorgeous. I wouldn't be sad if I saw that in the car park every day. But as for the US market, guys, a sub 35,000 Hyundai EV, lots of toys. How does that land with you?
I'll admit I'm skeptical here because this is very closely related to the Kia Niro EV. I tested one of those recently, and I was really hoping that it would end up, now that the Chevy Bolt is about to die and eventually get brought back, but we have few really affordable EV options, and I was kind of hoping the Niro and this would be, you're the chosen one. You're the next great affordable option for people. You're our only hope, but the Niro EV was low 40K, with some press car options. So it was pretty expensive. And seeing as how this is built in South Korea too, I don't think it's not going to qualify for tax credits. So I don't think it's going to be a super affordable option. I like that car. I didn't love it. I think it was best at just running errands around town. But for the price, I would much rather have really any version like the EV6 or the Ioniq 5. So I like the way it looks, but I'm not blown away nor mega excited about this thing, I think, when it comes here.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that the sub 35,000 model is presumably for the smaller battery, which has the same torque, less power, lower range, and presumably less toys depending on trim levels. There'll be various levels over here, and there'll be various levels in the US. But yeah, I think you're right. It's very much a car that's good for errands, but it doesn't look bad doing them.
Yeah, I think it looks good. I'm with you on that. And I like that they threw a couple little extra technology bits in it. But to me, they didn't make big enough strides for it to be super impactful. If they are going to command a higher price point, I don't know. I would have asked for faster DC fast charging, things like that would have made it more worth spending what is presumably going to be a higher price point than the outgoing model, which I think landed at somewhere in the low 30s, like 32, 33 or whatnot. But I think this will be it'll probably do the same thing that the Niro did, which is bump up in price a little bit because of these refreshes, a little bit of extra technology, but not big enough strides to command, a full I think it's competitively, like you said, there's not a lot here in the lower range, but why wouldn't you just try to save a little bit of extra money and go with the eGMP platform car?
Yeah. From the comments real quick, Danny Rizzo, this car is going to be expensive for Europe too. Kind of. It starts at £35,000 in the UK, which isn't too bad. I mean, a Golf can easily get more expensive than that, so we shall see. Right. That's it for the normal news. Let's have a chat about all things Tesla. Tesla news. Oh, what a week it's been for Musk's Motors, hasn't it? There's been an arson. There's been quite a big arson. 10 Model Ys in Germany have been set fire to, causing $537,000 worth of damage. A group has taken responsibility for it, calling it Tesla's Flambe. They also admitted to deflating 51 Porsche.
In Frankfurt-Fechenheim sind in der Nacht auch.
For our German listeners, in Frankfurt, there was a fire, kind of. Not a great time for Tesla. What do you guys think? What do you think motivated this?
It says that this was an environmental group, like a far left wing environmental protest that they said over raw materials, and lithium cobalt mining and such. I don't know. I certainly am sympathetic to all of those folks and what they believe and think, but it's I just think that this and the other really extreme climate protests you see, like gluing your feet to the floor of the at the U.S. Open. I'm just not sure that's the best way to win hearts and minds is with arson. So I don't know. It just
See that that's
I don't know who's going to
title.
look at this and be like, you know what, you're right. You're right. This is bad. I just don't know who looks at it that way.
I mean, there's so like the German climate groups do seem to have a general PR problem, and like all of them do to some extent, but like about a year ago, whenever it was, latest generation tried to invade the Formula E track, which like there's loads of reasons you should protest Formula E, like the fact that the whole event was sponsored by a Saudi state petrochemical company and stuff, but what they actually made themselves look like was that they didn't understand these cars were electric. And there's kind of a similar image problem here. So if your problem is with the materials being used, setting fire to those materials in no way recovers that or whatever. And also, if you're going to talk about the problem of the materials being used, then it would be better to look at stuff like the massive environmental impact of Giga Berlin, where you could actually sort of, reasonably campaign for some effect, whereas just setting fire to Teslas doesn't really, there's no, it bothers me that their messaging is bad.
To me, I'm like annoyed because it's like out of everyone that is advancing towards, sustainability, the people that are doing the best as far as innovation goes is probably Tesla. So why are you setting these on fire when they're the ones that are making the biggest shift happen in the automotive industry? And also the fact that it's like, I know you guys don't like to hear this because you're all journalists, but to be fair, people don't read articles a lot of times. They'll just see a headline. And so this is what makes me angry about it, is that now people think, oh, these just probably caught fire, and they're going to draw these assumptions and they're going to spew that misinformation where, they are always catching fire and whatnot, which the percentage is extremely lower than what we'd see out of any internal combustion engine vehicle. It's like 10 times more likely for a gas car to blow up or catch fire than an EV. But this just reinforces, in a terrible way, that EVs catch fire a lot. So that's just my 2 cents on it. It's annoying.
I mean,
I
they
feel bad
will
for those.
catch.
I feel bad for those emergency workers that had to deal with that. I mean, that many lithium ion fires, like that's a nasty day at work. So
I mean, it will give people the backup saying EVs catch fire a lot, but they will if someone actively sets fire to them. there is your difference. Like it's
weird.
It's not weird, that, isn't it? If you set fire to something, it will burn. Right, let's talk about something potentially happier. Mr. Patrick George, you were in Munich for a lovely mobility show, and you had a proper look at the new Model 3. What did you think? What was it like? Do you like it? Do you hate it? You wrote a lovely thing for Inside EV, so do head over there and have a read afterwards. But while we have the man in front of us, tell us everything, please.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. No, I was indeed in Munich. I absolutely love going to Germany, one of my favorite countries on earth. Any of our German listeners out there, y'all are right in my book. I got to tell you, it was weird, honestly, to see Tesla at an auto show again. That hasn't happened since middle of the last decade. I asked Filippo at Motorsport Network. He agreed. Even in Europe, they haven't done auto shows in forever. So it was weird to see them there. They had this one car that you're seeing the photos here, this gray car, the new Model 3, and then beside it they had the current Model Y. So it was a small display, a bunch of people walking around Tesla button downs, just 2 cars. And that was an interesting approach. Like they have a European communications team again. Like they're starting to do a little bit more of the traditional automaker stuff again. And I did like the car. I mean, I think it's kind of funny to see Tesla get into normal automaker stuff like auto shows and price cuts and now mid-cycle refreshes. And I wrote in that story that I rode to the airport in a ride-hailed Model 3. I sat in the back seat and I was like, I actually really love driving the Model 3. It's one of my favorite cars to drive, but like the backseat sucks. Like it's miserable back there. And I'm glad that they fixed it. This car is interesting because they did a lot of updates to it that Chinese buyers in particular really go for. The screen that's in the back seat, ambient interior lighting, just a nicer interior overall, cutting down on cabin noise. Those are things that those buyers really prioritize. And And you ask yourself, why did Tesla do that? It's because if you walked a few feet away from that, you would see this like gigantic display from BYD. This sprawling, whole lineup of cars that looked really good, which I think we're going to talk about later. But like, I think that, we've gone for years and years and years of hype around like the Tesla killer, like Mercedes has a Tesla killer, BMW has a Tesla killer. And it's always been BS, mostly. But I think that the way that the Chinese automakers are operating in their home country, which is one of Tesla's most important market, and in yours in Europe, like I think Tesla's like, oh crap, like this is something we have to take a little more seriously than we've been. And I think this Model 3 update's a big step towards that, especially so giving the same treatment to the Model Y, which you have to assume is going to happen soon. I liked it. I think if you're going to order a Model 3, there's no word on when this would go on sale in America. It might be I think it is worth waiting for, honestly, because it's got some nice tweaks I think you'd wish you'd have. But it's no game changer. I mean, it's a mid-cycle update. It's not something really crazy over the top that silences the critics. It's a nice update.
If I'd just taken delivery of a Model 3, do I have cause to be really cross?
I think I'd be bummed personally. Like I like the Model 3. I've considered buying one a bunch of times. But like I'd probably wait for this thing to hit my local Tesla store here in America. Like I think there are some nice features, especially got kids, like the screen in the back. It had Disney Plus. It has like Netflix. I queued up, InsideEVs test on YouTube of this car. So like I did like what I saw, but it's just don't expect a game changer. But I think it if you haven't bought a Model 3 yet somehow, like this is probably the one you're going to want more.
Yeah, if you don't care about the, price cuts recently that they did on the current Model 3 and you want to wait to get the extra like acoustic, more quiet interior, a little bit more luxe with the screens and the ambient lighting and all that, and supposedly a better suspension system, I think that it's smart to wait for it, but they're pretty, enticing when they drop the price like that. I don't know what the price of that is going to be here in the U.S., but I got to imagine if they're dropping prices of the current version, then this will probably be a little bit more money. But I think it's, I agree with you, Patrick. It's enough for what they need to do at this stage. Model 3 was a little bit long in the tooth. Project Juniper, which is the Model Y refresh supposedly that will eventually come too. I'll be a little upset with that one just because I have a Model Y and it'll be like, ugh, I don't want to look. It's the best-selling car pretty much close to being on the planet, and it's everywhere. So I would like a nice little change in design.
I will say this, is that like as good as Tesla is, they're still in countless ways, especially in America, like the EV leader, like they suck at launching new cars. Like that is where this company is still weakest. And I'm probably going to make a few folks on the street mad. Like I don't count the Cybertruck as a giant win in that department, like not yet. But like this, like launching new cars is something that BYD and the Chinese automakers are very good at. So like this is a nice step, but eventually they're really going to need to up their, updating game and their new car game if they're going to want to stay in the lead. And it's not even from like Ford and Hyundai so much. It's like China,
Well, Patrick, as you so handily led us into it, there is another Tesla.
I'm here for you, baby. I'm all,
thanks,
all trying to do for you.
Thanks, man. So Wall Street's a little reckons Tesla should be concerned by BYD. They said they've done a bit of a teardown and reckon that BYD is going to cause Musk and Co. a lot of trouble. How do we feel about that?
I mean, because this is, based on the fact that they've got very equivalent technologies, etc. But I don't know how much people really care about the technology in the Tesla if it doesn't have a Tesla badge on it, in terms of how they're why people are purchasing a Tesla. Because, like Patrick referenced, there's been all kinds of cars that are Tesla killers that outperform Teslas, that are much more luxury than Teslas for the price point and whatever. And I don't, or at least the price point in Europe. I think the thing is, when people are buying Teslas, they actually do still just want a Tesla at the minute, and so I don't know how bothered people will be by this.
So you think that while the tech is there, the brand equity isn't? Yeah.
Can I pose a question to the group?
Yeah.
Would you ever buy a Chinese made car? Like a Chinese brand? I'm not necessarily
I
Absolutely.
literally just
Polestar.
put that in the comments. That's what.
I want an Aura Cat so much.
You really don't.
I-
I've driven one. It's awful. They're so bad. The Funky
Hella
Cat
cute,
is
though.
terrible. Yeah, but something can be cute. But if it tries to, like, if it makes your life worse by existing, then no, bad. It's
but
awful.
that's all my cars.
I'll give you the skinny on another week's episode. But that, I'm afraid, lovely friends, is all we have time for this week. So going through the list, we have a big goodbye from Lacey, Miss GoElectric.
Yes, and I just want to throw this out there real quick. I'm actually leaving tonight, but I'm headed to Albany, New York. I'm doing another one of my GoElectric group rides. So if anyone is in the Albany area, go to my website, missgoelectric.com, and get information and join us for an e-bike group ride around town. That's tomorrow morning starting at about 9 o'clock. So come join me, ride some e-bikes around Albany.
Patrick George, who looks like he's about to go to Albany and ride an e-bike.
I'm tempted to, Lacey. You're going to get some amazing weather for that. So yeah, have fun out there. Very cool.
We were also Hazel Southwell, who is being very silent.
I'm just going to go and pick up crashed bits of cars from the pit lane in a minute. So
can you bring me back a bit of splitter, please? That would be very lovely.
I will try.
Thanks. And I've been Alex Goy. I won't be seeing you next week, but the rest of these guys hopefully will. I haven't had a proper look at the schedule. That's on me, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. But these guys will be here next Friday, same time, same place. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And one final thing, if you have anything you want to say to us, get in touch and contact at InsideEVs.com, and we'll talk about it. See you next time.